Join us today as we dive through the world of the spotted lanternfly, a highly invasive species on its way to Massachusetts. We explore its impact on local ecosystems, the potential impacts on the Hanscom Air Force Base mission, and what you can do to help stop its spread. So a little background on the spotted lanternfly. It's a strikingly colorful insect. It originated from Asia, and it was originally discovered in the United States in 2014 in Pennsylvania. Since then, it spread to several other states, including Massachusetts. It's a serious threat to the local ecosystems and potential mission operations here at Hanscom. In Pennsylvania, for example, they've caused millions of dollars in damages to the grape, plant nursery, and agritourism industry. So what type of damage do they cause, and why is it a big deal for us? So the spotted lanternfly has a piercing, sucking mouth part called a proboscis. They use it to pierce the bark and stems of plants and feed on the sap, and this feeding can weaken the plant, and then making it more susceptible to disease and other pests. Additionally, as they feed, they excrete a sugary substance called honeydew, which can attract other pests like wasps. Eventually, they promote the growth of sooty mold that further damages the plant. So it sounds like a real nightmare for farmers and gardeners. So how did it end up in Massachusetts? And where have they been found? The spotted lanternfly likely arrived in Massachusetts through human activities such as movement of infested materials like plants, firewood, and shipping containers, or hitchhiking on vehicles, trains, and other transportation means. So now that we've got a good introduction to the spotted lanternfly, I'd like to welcome Elizabeth here from the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources to now discuss how it's impacting Massachusetts. So Elizabeth, if you could introduce yourself and give us a little background on what the state's role is in managing and preparing for the spotted lanternfly.
Sure. Hello. Thank you for having me. We really appreciate the time everyone's taking to listen in and learn about spotted lanternfly. So what the state's doing right now is we're working to try and slow down the spread of this insect by knocking down its population, raising awareness about how it can be accidentally transported to new areas, and encouraging people to report sightings of spotted lanternfly if they see it. All of this can buy us time to figure out better management strategies to hopefully reduce their impact in the long term. It can also reduce the chance that it gets spread to other states that have a lot of highly susceptible agricultural crops like grapes. However, unfortunately, none of the states that have had to deal with spotted lanternfly have had any luck totally getting rid of it. Because of this, we're working really hard to also get out management information to people and to help them to understand how spotted lanternfly might impact them directly. We're aiming to try to help people to mitigate the impact of spotted lanternfly on both their lives and on their businesses.
Well, that sounds pretty daunting. So are we just spinning our wheels, or are we going to be able to actually have an impact in our mitigation and surveying efforts?
That's another great question. So there's a lot of different things that people can do to try and slow down spotted lanternfly and to actually have kind of an effect in the long term. So, for example, checking vehicles, packages, or other things being moved long distances for the presence of spotted lanternfly can actually make a really big difference in slowing their spread. This can catch them before they get a chance to establish in a new area. People can also monitor for spotted lanternfly in the areas that they're in by learning what they look like and by checking some of their favorite host plants like tree of heaven, which is also invasive. Finally, if there's a large population of spotted lanternfly near where someone is, they can use some of the management tactics that we have in our management guide to try and reduce their numbers. And there are luckily a lot of different options that people can use. So, for example, there are insecticides, you can do egg mass scraping, you can even, in some case, vacuum up spotted lanternfly using the right vacuum, so your vacuum doesn't get too gross inside. Things like a shop vac. All of this can be effective in locally knocking down their numbers to reduce their impact locally. So all of these things are things that individuals or organizations can do. But on a larger scale, in the long term, there is hope as well. There are people who are working on finding those long-term solutions to better deal with spotted lanternfly, including things like more effective management strategies. And in even the longer term, there are projects to identify parasitoids, which are essentially they're tiny predators that only eat spotted lanternfly and nothing else. And these can, hopefully, if we're able to identify them and get them released, be able to keep their populations in check. And that would be really helpful because it would essentially help there be fewer of those big spikes in population of spotted lanternfly that are what are really causing the most severe problems right now. So there is hope. I do want to make sure people understand there is hope in the long term.
So my understanding is the major concern here in Massachusetts isn't just the fact that it's an invasive species that causes trouble. It can actually have a real harmful effect on the ecosystem and our agriculture. And is that right?
Yeah. So there are certain types of plants that they can kill. So things like grapes in particular, they will outright kill. Also, I don't think people should underestimate the agrotourism impact, or even any sort of outdoor venue that people have that they're trying to invite people into. In the states that have big populations of spotted lanternfly, they've been seeing these basically big, I don't know if swarm is the right word, but basically big swarms of spotted lanternfly, particularly in the fall, that just make it unpleasant to be outside, make people less likely to visit these outdoor spaces. They've disrupted weddings and things like that. So really disrupting people's businesses. And as I mentioned, we're also very concerned about making sure that we're doing what we can to try and avoid spreading it to other states that have even more crops that would be directly impacted by them.
Well, I know at Hanscom, we're a small 850 or so acre, plot of land, just outside of Boston. So it seems like a really small area for us to be focusing on it ourselves. But I can tell you that at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware, it's caused some significant, military impacts with frustrating cargo and outgoing household goods, and deployments have to be decontaminated. I think in Pennsylvania, there's even a certification process for some cargo that leaves the state going to other states. So here at Hanscom, our concern is how is that going to affect us, and what can we do ahead of time to try to identify and get a handle around it. So I know one of the biggest things we can do right now is just public awareness and outreach. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important parts if spotted lanternfly hasn't shown up where you are yet, because the earlier you catch it, the better chance you have to kind of reduce that population size to an amount that it's not causing as many of those bigger problems. Now, of course, in the long term, in other states, they've kind of spread enough that those populations eventually connect with each other, but it can buy you some time in the meantime until that happens, if that happens.
Yeah, I know at Hanscom, when we go through our annual risk assessment on all the different environmental topics or areas like tanks or hazardous waste or air quality, that is the biggest potential impact to our ability to accomplish our mission and also to health and safety. Last year, this flushed out as the highest risk, environmental risk, to the Hanscom Air Force Base. So we're putting together a working group that includes our security forces, that includes our household goods shipping services, our deploying services, incoming, outgoing cargo and aircraft and materials, construction materials, so that we can identify where those risk areas are. And then at least, at this first phase, try to get a good public awareness so that they can report it to us if they see it, and they can take care of it, while they're on the spot. I think that's our focus for this, upcoming season. And if we do see it at Hanscom Air Force Base, we'll move into the next phase. And So as part of that working group, I appreciate you and the Department of Agricultural Resources agreeing to be part of that working group. And I hope we can, do something productive together to make this, to see how we can mitigate this as best as possible.
Absolutely. We're glad to be involved and help however we can.
Okay, well, thank you, Elizabeth. I appreciate your time.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me.